You already know the loud ones, the ones who raise their voice, the ones who slam doors, the ones who make the danger obvious. Those people are easy to protect yourself from. You see it coming. You leave, or you fight back. The ones I'm talking about today give you none of that. They smile while they take space from you. They speak gently while they rearrange the boundaries of your life. They remember the small details that make you feel seen, and then use that same attention as quiet pressure. After enough time with them, you feel smaller, not because they attacked you, because something in the air changed, and you can't point to a single moment that explains it. This is the quiet danger. There is a particular kind of person who treats kindness the way other people treat volume, as a tool, as leverage, as a way to keep the people around them slightly more careful, slightly more grateful, slightly more willing to adjust. It almost never looks like control at first. It looks like care. They say, "I just want what's best for you." They say, "I'm only trying to help." They say, "I would never want to hurt you." And because the words sound right, you start questioning the feeling in your chest instead of questioning them. Watch what actually happens. They offer help, then keep a quiet ledger. Sometimes only in the way their energy shifts when the favor isn't returned exactly as they expected. They give soft advice, then become faintly disappointed when you choose differently. They support you in public and withdraw a degree of warmth the moment you decide something they didn't prefer. The change is almost never dramatic. That's what makes it work. One day the atmosphere is open. The next day it's a few degrees cooler. No argument, no raised voice. Just a drop in temperature you're expected to notice and correct if you want the warmth back. Most people begin adjusting without realizing it. They become more careful with their words. They stop bringing up certain topics. They start asking for small permissions they never used to need. They learn the shape of the other person's preferences and slowly fold themselves into it. And the nice person never has to raise their voice once. Real kindness does not require you to shrink. Real kindness can tolerate disagreement without cooling the room. Real kindness does not punish you with reduced availability when you choose something for yourself. Performative niceness does. It creates a soft cage. You're free as long as you stay inside the outline they prefer. You've met this person. Maybe you lived with them. Maybe you worked under them. Maybe you loved them and couldn't understand why you felt so tired after conversations. That looked completely fine from the outside. They were the one everyone called thoughtful, easygoing, reasonable. The one who never caused problems, and yet around them you monitored yourself more carefully than usual. You edited small things. You felt a low-level need to keep the peace even when nothing was wrong. That feeling is the signal. When someone's presence makes you more self-conscious than most people do, something is being managed, even if their words are gentle. The most dangerous version isn't the person who is secretly cruel. It's the person who genuinely believes they are good while still needing the people around them to remain a little smaller, a little more grateful, a little more oriented toward their comfort. They don't experience it as control. They experience it as care, which is why it's so hard to name. You can't point to an insult or a threat. You can only point to a pattern of gradual self-reduction, and patterns are easy to deny. In a relationship, it often starts with generous acts of service. Life feels easier with them. Then the help quietly becomes a standard. Independent action starts carrying a small emotional cost, a slight withdrawal, a change in tone, a comment that sounds caring but lands as correction. Over time, you stop tracking what you actually want because wanting it has become expensive. At work, the same pattern wears a different face. The always helpful person everyone likes and trusts. Their helpfulness creates subtle obligations. Disagreement feels riskier than with more direct people because the social cost of seeming ungrateful is higher. Their reputation becomes a shield. Naming a problem risks making you look difficult. In families, it can be the hardest to see. The parent or sibling who never raises their voice, who frames everything as concern, who uses disappointment as the main tool. You learn early that certain choices cost you emotional access, not through punishment, but through a quiet reduction in warmth. The mechanism stays consistent. Kindness is offered freely at first, then it becomes conditional. The conditions are rarely stated. They are enforced through the regulation of emotional temperature. When you stay inside the preferred shape, the warmth is available. When you step outside it, the warmth decreases just enough to make you notice and correct course. This works because most people are more sensitive to the loss of warmth than to the absence of open conflict. We will endure a surprising amount of quiet pressure to keep the emotional climate stable. There's another layer that makes confrontation difficult. These people usually have strong social protection. Because they stay pleasant in public, others assume good intent. If you try to describe the pattern, it often sounds petty. They're so nice. They would never do that on purpose. The public performance creates a credibility gap. Your private experience doesn't match the image everyone else sees, so you start doubting your own perception. This is one of the most reliable effects of weaponized kindness. It doesn't just control the target. It isolates them from external validation. Inside the person doing this, the story is usually different. Many are not coldly calculating. They are protecting an image of themselves as good and reasonable. Direct conflict threatens that image, so they develop ways to shape outcomes without ever appearing forceful. Their niceness solves their own discomfort with power while still letting them steer the environment. The effect on you is still real. The gap between their self-image and their impact is where a lot of the damage lies. Over time, the target develops a specific exhaustion, not the exhaustion of open conflict. The exhaustion of constant low-level self-monitoring, of calculating the emotional cost of ordinary decisions, of losing track of preference because preference has become expensive. Some adapt by becoming more compliant. Some become more distant. Some leave only after years of trying to make the dynamic feel normal. The ones who stay longest are often the ones who value harmony most. They keep searching for the version of themselves that will restore the original warmth, without realizing the warmth was always conditional on a degree of self-reduction. Healthy. Kindness looks different, it doesn't disappear. When you choose differently, it doesn't keep quiet score. It doesn't require you to manage the other person's emotional temperature as the price of closeness. It can tolerate your autonomy without reading it as rejection. The difference shows up in ordinary moments, when you take up space and nothing cools. If you've been on the receiving end of the quieter version for a long time, naming it can feel lonely at first. The story you've been told is that they are the good one. Good people don't control. So if you feel controlled, the problem must be you. That story is incomplete. Some people use darkness loudly. Others use it quietly, wrapped in softness, and call it care. The second kind is harder to leave. It rarely gives you a clean reason. It just slowly teaches you that your full presence carries a cost. Once you can see the temperature shifts for what they are, something changes. You stop treating every cooling as a personal failure. You start treating it as information. You notice which relationships expand when you take up space and which ones contract. You begin to prefer the ones that stay steady. That preference is not hardness. It's clarity. The people who truly care about you will not require you to become smaller to keep their warmth. They may disagree. They may feel disappointed. But the climate itself does not become a tool. If the climate is the tool, you are not dealing with simple kindness. You are dealing with a quieter form of power, and once you can feel the difference in your body, it is very hard to unfeel it. You start recognizing the pattern earlier. You stop explaining away the low-level tension. You stop assuming your discomfort is always the thing that needs managing. Some of the most important shifts don't come from dramatic confrontations. They come from finally being able to name the thing that was always operating just below the threshold of language. This is one of those things. The nicest people are not always the safest. Sometimes the softest voice in the room is the one that has learned how to rearrange everyone else's shape without ever raising its volume. Pay attention to how you feel after ordinary time with someone, not after the big conversations, after the small ones, after the days when nothing obvious happened. If you consistently leave those interactions feeling slightly less solid than you arrived, that information matters. Some forms of kindness are not free. They carry quiet terms. Learning to feel those terms is one of the more useful forms of self-protection there is. The loud threats announce themselves. The soft ones rarely do. They just slowly teach you to need less of yourself. And that lesson, once learned deeply enough, can take years to unlearn.